Why even 45 ACP? The year's 2020. We're balls deep in the corona pandemic, and ammo is very scarce. In everything, really. Unless you have some wildcat stuff or an AK, you're looking for ammo. And maybe, just maybe, this is the time for the 40 guys to shine. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're going to talk about is, why would I even 45 ACP when 9mm is so excellent? And that's a great question. A lot of guys are going to say, hey, 9mm is better now, you don't have to get a 45. And there's also that camp that says 9mm versus 45 is a stupid argument, and then they'll push you towards the 9mm. So, what I'm going to tackle today is that question, why even 45 ACP anymore? I've got 5 advantages and about 5 to 6 disadvantages. We're going to go over them. All right, first and foremost, you have a remarkably excellent and low pressure 230 grain round. 230 grain is pretty much the standard weight. I know it's allegedly heavy for caliber. It was really 200 grains. There's 185, 200, 220, 230. Those are typically what you'll see out there, but by and large, people are using 230 grain. What's good about it? 230 grain is already very low pressure. It's subsonic inherently because it's going less than 1,000 feet per second. And if you're using 230 grain standard pressure, your pistol is going to last a very, very, very long time. In fact, in the description below, I'm going to link my very, very good friend, one of my best friends in the world, his discussion with Jesse over at HK, the HK Armorer, and he's going to go through that. I could spend a whole video talking about how Federal's test mule went hundreds of thousands of rounds, which is impressive. Even with parts replacement, that's still really stellar. So because the round is so low pressure, your parts last a lot longer, it's a lot easier on the weapon system, even suppressed. Because when you employ a suppressor, it increases back pressure. However, if you don't have a whole lot to start with, when you put the can on there, it's really not going to beat the gun up too much. I still recommend replacing the parts at the recommended intervals based on your platform, but I've seen guys that have never changed parts on 45 caliber pistols, and if their round counts are to be believed, then they've used them quite a bit. And quite frankly, my tan USP 45 is evidence of that. Even though I did all the parts replacement, this gun still runs really well. Same barrel, same slide, same frame, doing pretty good. Some of the same other parts as well, like this purple ass extractor. Oof. Another great thing about 45 while we're talking about grain weight is you don't have to hunt around for your load. Hee. A lot of guys with 40, 9mm, 357 SIG, some other stuff out there, you're spending a lot of time shooting a lot of different things. And 9mm is probably the most guilty nowadays because they've increased the technology so much that you have some crazy lightweight rounds and some crazy heavyweight rounds that I've never seen before. With 45, the simplicity is key. 230 grain, and I use either 230 grain ball or 230 grain hollow point, and I'm set. If you want to get crazy, you can either use 185 plus P or 230 grain plus P, which I have no idea why that exists. But it's there and you can use it. However, it's really simple to just go to the store and be like, 230 grain, buying that. All right, bullet diameter. Now, don't jump ahead of me here because I know I can already hear the comments. And if I see some of these dumbass comments I see all the time, like, ooh, that 9mm is gonna open up the same size as that 45. We're stupid for this argument. That's not where I'm going, turns out. This is 0.45 and this is 0.35. That's inch. So what does this mean? In our modern tactical environment, a lot of dudes are wearing a lot of tactical gear. And even if they're not wearing a plate carrier or any sort of body armor, they're still LARPing around in quite a bit of gear. And if it's colder, even more so. So if this hollow point gets clogged, this diameter is going to get you closer to a critical structure versus the smaller diameter 9mm. Whether that happens or not is very situationally dependent, and it's a what if thing. However, if that's a concern of yours, or you're shooting people in a lot of denim jackets because the 80s are in full swing again. Never thought I'd see denim jackets and mullets ever again in my life.
I don't know, I just woke up from a little nap. It's a little dark, but you guys silly? I'm still gonna send it.
Except in certain parts of Kentucky or West Virginia. You might have that concern. So 45 is gonna stay, you know, a larger diameter, which is good. And if you don't have access to hollow points for whatever reason, or you're a military guy and your options are ball 9mm or ball 45, I would highly suggest the ball 45. But that's up to you and your mission set. It be that way. Another good point is if you reload. You can reload 45 brass a lot, like a lot. Learned this from firearm tutorials. He let me know, hey, cool thing about 45 is I can reload this a lot. So that made me happy. I'm not in reloading yet. I might get there, and I know some of you guys that reload love reloading so much that you are a brass goblin. So if you're gonna be a brass goblin and you shoot 45, it's a good look right there. Because they're normally 230 grain anyway, and everything's so low pressure, it's a well-built casing, and the gun won't really deform it. So you're not really seeing the same issues you'll see with other calibers, so it's easier to reload more frequently. And you can reuse the brass for a long time. Lately, and given the pandemic, I'm not gonna say this is gospel, but you can usually find 45 ACP because everybody's jumped on the 9mm train. So this point is 45 ACP is usually more plentiful and easier to obtain. However, the little star next to that is pandemic. The Rona has made everybody crazy. And lastly, with 45, you have a wonderful push recoil impulse. Now, if you're jumping from a 9 to a 45, there's going to be a lot of people that shoot it like this. Once you master the recoil impulse, it's very predictable. It's a nice gentle push, and it doesn't tend to get away from you unless you're sleeping on it, which is very good. And if you get a 45 from a reputable manufacturer, your recoil is going to be very tame. So an HK, a P227, maybe a 220, and if you have a forged steel 1911, we're looking at a higher end spectrum 1911. We're not talking about lightweight 1911s. All right, on to the disadvantages. I know a lot of people are scooching their seat up because they're more interested in the 45's disadvantages. I'm not going to start where you think I'm going to start, though. This is kind of a teeter-totter. Support for the 45 is very 50-50. Unless you're rocking a 1911, it's going to be very difficult to find parts and or magazines and or holsters for your gun, which is kind of a thing. You will find some, because most people realize 45 is still a NATO round and people still have a deep love for it. So you usually find, even in your smaller gun shops, plenty of 45 ACP support. However, it's not always plentiful because 9mm is what everybody wants nowadays. But because of that, if your local area is mostly comprised of 9mm shooters, you might get lucky and the 45 stuff doesn't get touched. So if you have a Glock 21 or some HKs, in the case of my local gun shop, You can still get parts there. Other than that though, the internet is your friend. And along that support train, unless you have an HK, a Glock, or a 1911, a lot of the 45s get discontinued. And I know I just earlier said the SIG P227, but we all know that gun was discontinued. You're not gonna really find Ruger P45s anywhere. You know, so there's a lot of stuff out there that has been discontinued, so you might even love that gun. Like there's a P227 crowd out there, and I'm not saying I wouldn't get one either. I like my HK45 better. I mean, if you can get into a 45 ACP 226 essentially, that's a great gig, and they already make the extended magazines for it. But you're not going to be finding the mags from anyone else really. So it's kind of like that, again, that 50-50 support that you're going to run into. Next, weight.
That's a huge bitch.
They are chunky. You're looking at heavier guns across the spectrum. Sometimes you'll find something that's, you know, lighter for its size, but it's giving something up usually to achieve that lighter weight. And weight is very subjective. There's guys out there that are gonna say, I shoot competition, I want a Beretta 92X competition where it's like 40 something ounces unloaded, it's all steel, it's got extra weight in it. Or a SIG P320 Legion, it's got that extra front nose weight that keeps it flat. And then there's other guys that are, I want the lightest possible handgun out there. And 45 ACPs are never gonna be on that lightest end of the spectrum. And if you get a super light 45 ACP, that gentle push recoil is going to be amplified. So there's some baby SIG 1911 style 45s out there that are just miserable to shoot in my opinion. And there's some lightweight commander size even 1911s that are not that great because they're so light. And I do, if you're going compact, the HK45C is what I recommend almost across the board. With the Glock 30 or Glock 30S is really good. But when you start, and strangely, the P320C 45 is the smoothest 45 ACP compact I've ever fired. I still recommend this, but that P320C 45, the capacity's trash, but damn, that thing shoots soft.
Alright, you better waterfall it because you got dip and shit.
I check my dip out.
I don't care, waterfall it.
I was gonna waterfall it anyway.
Waterfall it.
Coronavirus.
I hate you. This shoots really nice.
Guys, rim his whole fucking bar. For a big caliber?
Well, not just, it just shoots really nice.
But again, your weight is always going to be a consideration, and you can't really get away from that with these 45s. I will say, if you get the perfect balance of proportions and everything like these HK45s, they're really solid. They're lighter than the USP and the Mark 23, your 227s, those heavier guns. The 45 is like that happy place. But again, you know, you're still fighting with that weight. And a Glock 21 or Glock 21 SF is also in a similar weight category as this HK45. Very similar overall dimensions, minus, you know, you need the SF or the Gen 4 for a nicer grip, but by and large you're looking at a heavier gun. Capacity. Yes, we're here. This is where everybody thought I was going to start. Capacity. So here's the thing with capacity. More and more modern gunfights are, how much extended magazine can I bring to a gunfight? I have two on the table, and you're not going to get away from the limitations of a 45. I mean, unless you want to be holding a brick, you know, like the FN, it runs 15 rounds, right? But try to load a 15 round magazine into the gun, or anything like that. You can get extended magazines for a Glock. Shit, you can get them for this Mark 23, the USP, any of these guns. This is an HK Parts extended mag. So they are out there. They're very expensive though, and it's much easier to procure a 9mm in the same size signature with double the round capacity. So that's not something to be ignored. So your capacity is going to be less. You have to be more cognizant of your trigger pulls, and they're not great for modern gunfights because most people just spray and pray nowadays. And I know the old, and I mean old, FBI statistics are being chucked around like most gunfights are over between 2 and 6 rounds. Not anymore, they're not, bud. If you like, if you go to the West End here or a lot of these other places, you're looking at 20 to 30 shots. A lot of cops will empty their gun and reload. A lot of criminals just spray and pray. There's a lot of rounds going off. So if you want to sit here and tell me, hey, you know, 2 to 6 round, no, dude. Like, things have really amped up, and I'm not going to sit here and advocate that you plan for the least likely scenario. My ultimate hope for everybody, including myself, is you never have to employ a firearm to defend your life or in a serious capacity. It's a miserable thing. But should you have to, understand that, one, each trigger press is personal accountability going down range, and people with more capacity are going to use more capacity. So whatever you have at your disposal, you're going to use it, because most people, the way they respond to contact or a threat or something like that is to shoot everything they have. Unless you're a disciplined combatant, you know, like you've been in the military, you've been in a lot of gunfights, you know, hey, this is how many rounds I need to process this threat. Most people, maybe even myself included, are going to empty that magazine. So you can either do that 13 times or 20 times, you know, at the best case scenario here. But I will also say there's a lot of idiots out there on the internet that piss me off because they'll say, the 1911's dumb because it only holds 8 rounds. And then when you catch them carrying, they're carrying a Glock 43. So, you know, they got a single stack 9 that's tiny that has 6 to 8 rounds in it. You know, it's the reason I don't have a P225, even though I love that gun, the Baby Legion. I love that thing so much, but it has 8 rounds. Same thing with the P7 M8. I love that gun so much. It's a laser beam, but it holds 8 rounds. And I don't feel like reloading that much. And reloads are when you get caught. So I knowingly tout these guns here, knowing full well that the capacity is less, but these same idiots that down a 1911 because of capacity are also walking around lazy as shit carrying a single stack 9mm. So be careful where you get your information, and obviously you have to do this for yourself. You don't even have to listen to me. I don't care. But don't let these dudes shame you out of a 45 and then you're like, hey man, what do you carry? And then you buy whatever gun they told you to buy and they're carrying a 43 or even a 43X. This thing holds 10 rounds. This thing holds 10 rounds. A Glock 30S holds 10 rounds. See what I'm saying? All right, so your size. There's no getting around it. Talked about it earlier. Being size efficient with a 45 is difficult. The 30S and this are Glock 19 sized. Everybody's usually about comfortable carrying a Glock 19. Despite the size, you usually get a really, really good barrel length and sight radius, which is always important to me. Your mileage may vary. All right, another negative for 45 is cost fluctuates a lot. Before the pandemic, about 6 to 8 months, maybe even a year, with all the major new YouTubers and Instagram guys pushing 9mm, 45 had come down quite a bit. And I mean a considerable amount back to like pre-Sandy Hook prices and below that. So I follow ammunition prices like the stock market, and maybe if I had put my effort into the stock market, I'd have more money to worry about those ammunition prices. See how that works? But that aside, I've seen 45 be damn near a case of 5.56. You know, you're spending high 3s, low 4s on a case of 45, and then meanwhile 9mm was like 200, 230. But now I'm seeing below 300 a case. However, again, that was before the pandemic, so getting into 45 isn't as expensive as it used to be. Lastly, the community. The gun community, by and large, has become almost as toxic as dependent wives or California or New York wives. They bicker amongst themselves so much that it gets really, really stupid really, really fast. And it's hard to get good information. But there's some people out there, the 45 guys exclusively, that'll say, I get a 45 because I know I have to shoot somebody less. Not necessarily the right answer. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But they're out there. And then you also have the 9mm only crowd who are equally as ignorant, saying a 45 is outdated because the capacity sucks, they suck to shoot, there's too much recoil. The guys with a comp 9mm that have trouble shooting it flat, and then I bring out a stock 9mm Glock or HK or SIG and shoot it just as flat. You spend $1,000 on a gun to still be a spaghetti arms piece of shit. Sorry, sidetracked. The ignorance around handguns is especially prevalent. Usually it fades a little bit as you get into rifle rounds. Everyone knows a 308 hits harder than a 5.56. But I'm sure that just started a flame war in the comments too. But the important thing to understand is there's a lot of ignorance surrounding pistols in general and employing a pistol. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I don't care if you have this Mark 23 or the best possible case scenario to maximize the performance of a pistol round. So like you pocket carry your Glock 34 or something like that. Pistols suck. It's better just to have a rifle. So be that as it may, making sure you optimize your pistol selection for the application, whatever. Just understand its limitations and its advantages. And a spare mag is always ideal. So with your HK45, I highly recommend these 13 rounders. They've done nothing but help me out. And then if you're a 45C carrier, get that 8 rounder spent and reload with a 10 round as soon as possible. Or if you have a Glock, you know what you can do. You know, carry with that 10 rounder and then ram that stick in there. Okay, so why even 45 ACP anymore? What's the ultimate conclusion of this waste of time that you've taken us on? The ultimate conclusion is, if you're gonna suppress it, 45. If you want simplicity in your ammunition stores, 45 ACP. You can, however, step off the ledge and get equally retarded because there's a lot of different 45 stuff out there. But if you want a round that when you buy it, doesn't matter whether it's a ball or a hollow point, it's gonna hit hard, it's gonna get you those psychological stops, and it's not that bad to shoot, definitely look at the 230 grain. 45 ACP is your guy. And if you're in a capacity limited state, 45 ACP all day, because you're limited to 10 rounds anyway. That's my personal feeling. But you'll never ever, if you have a suppressor, you will never ever hate shooting your 45 ACP. You'll love every single trigger press. So my friends, ultimately the 45 ACP is still very viable. With powder technologies and advancements in bullet design, even though the 9mm come up in the world, there's still a healthy place with the 45 ACP. It has not been relegated into inferiority like a lot of people would have you believe. So, do I recommend it? Yes. Make sure you get a solid pistol and you do good work with it and you can shoot it. Those are very important. Each trigger press is accountability going downrange, and there are disadvantages to everything, so keep that in mind. Thanks for watching. Take care out there.